What's going on? My name is Marvin and welcome to part 1 of How to OneWheel. Today I'm going to show you the basics of getting on and off the board and the general layout of a OneWheel. And now I have here for demonstration the OneWheel XR, although pretty much all of this is going to be applicable to the Pint and older models of the OneWheel as well. Starting off with the general layout of the OneWheel, there's of course the wheel in the middle, which is then covered by the fender, although some people do prefer to ride fenderless. There are then the 2 side rails on either side that span the length of the board, and then of course there are the foot pads on either side. Now you can always tell which is the back of the OneWheel because it is the side that tends to naturally rest on the ground. This is because this side is heavier because it has the battery in it. The front side, by default on the XR, has the foot pad where it has the blue line going down the middle. And on either side of this blue line there is a pressure sensor which the OneWheel uses to determine if there is someone on the board and whether to engage the motor or not. Then at the front side on the right there is the charging port here, which kind of looks like an XLR cable, and on the other side here there is a power button. Now to get started, let's turn the OneWheel on. Please make sure the OneWheel is in this kind of a position, because if the OneWheel is in an odd orientation, when the power button is hit, it won't actually turn on. Also, if there's any pressure on the pressure sensors, when you try to turn the OneWheel on, it won't actually turn on either. It will turn on and connect to your phone, but it will give you a notification saying that it won't engage the motor. This is kind of out of safety reasons, so that way, you know, if you have it in the back of a car and it's still on, it won't start spinning because the pressure sensors are touched by anything. Anyway, once we have it here, you know, perfectly set up, we can hit this button and you'll see that these blue LEDs come on. And that means your OneWheel is now on. Now we are ready to get on the board. Basically, what you want to do is always start with you're putting your foot on the rear of the board first, the one that is on the ground. Now, typically, you can align your foot however feels comfortable. I will make a full stance guide in a coming episode, but for now, just, you know, put your foot on there however feels comfortable. Next, put your front foot on the board here and make sure that you're applying pressure to both the front and rear pressure sensors. And you can do this by just making sure your foot is properly on the board. Next, once your feet are properly on the board, put your weight on your forward foot just to level out the board, and you will hear the motor automatically engage once the board is somewhat level. Then you're ready to ride. Riding the OneWheel is a very intuitive and simple experience, especially if you have any kind of previous surfing or snowboarding or skateboarding experience. Typically, what you do is do the same kind of toe heel roll to control the steering on the board, and you basically just lean forward or backward to control the acceleration or deceleration of the board. The board does most of the balancing for you by adjusting the torque applied to the wheel based upon the orientation and the speed of the board. Once you're done kind of trying out your first basic maneuvering and you want to get off the board, this is where the trickiness begins. Getting off the board is arguably one of the harder parts of learning to OneWheel. Now there's 2 main ways to get off the OneWheel. The first one is the one I'd advise for beginners. It is come to a relative stop, and once you're, you know, kind of shaky and stopping, jump off the board with both feet. This will make sure the board doesn't fall out from under you, and it's honestly just the safest way to get off the board because you can just get off it, jump, land safely, and the board will be fine. Especially if you're practicing in some sort of area like this. Like I've come here down to my local community college track. It's a nice soft rubbery surface. It's very grippy, very quiet. I would definitely recommend coming somewhere here if you're learning how to OneWheel. Option number 2, and definitely the option you want to learn and use primarily once you're getting better at OneWheeling, is properly disengaging the motor by lifting your heel once you're stationary. Basically, once you're stationary, you basically lift your heel and it will disengage the motor, allowing you to tilt the board back into the default position and step off safely without any issue. Now this is typically the preferred method of getting off the OneWheel because you stay on the board until you're off the board, and you keep the board in control the whole time, especially if you're at a crosswalk or something. You don't want to jump off the board and have it, you know, flip over or roll away if you kind of don't properly jump off of it. This is definitely the safer method and one that you want to practice a little bit before you really go on any longer OneWheel journeys. So let's practice that again. Basically, get on the OneWheel, come to a stop, lift your heel, and you will hear the motor disengage, allowing you to basically put most of your weight on your rear foot, whichever, depending on whether you're riding normal or goofy, you can put the weight on your rear foot, let the board tilt back, and then once the board is tilted back, you can step off the board. One thing you can actually do if you want to practice the more proper way of dismounting the OneWheel, but you're not quite comfortable with it yet, is find yourself a quality guardrail like this one here, and basically get on your OneWheel, and then bring it over to the guardrail, and then hold onto the guardrail and basically practice just lifting your heel up and seeing how it feels to disengage the motor. And once you get the feel for this, you can use this to basically test out, okay, how does it accelerate? Where is it still? How will it disengage the motor? How is it best to step off? Once you get the feel for it, it will definitely aid you a lot in your practicing for the more proper way of dismounting on the OneWheel. Now, there are a couple important things you got to keep in mind while learning how to get off the OneWheel, because this is something very important to know, especially if you need to stop or get off in an emergency situation. Now, one thing you definitely want to avoid when getting off the OneWheel is stepping off with your rear foot first. Because if you try to step off with your rear foot first, while your front foot is still engaging the pressure sensors, your OneWheel will basically tip forward and then start to accelerate and basically go out from under you and send the OneWheel off in one direction, and it will make you do the splits. This is typically the biggest mistake people make when first trying to get off the OneWheel, and is typically what causes the most injury when people try to learn how to OneWheel, other than, you know, straight up normal crashing. Another thing that beginners often do when learning the OneWheel is when they get on the board, they'll experience a lot of side-to-side shaking like this. This is usually due to people not being used to the movement of the OneWheel, and basically the small muscles in their legs that are basically used for balance are overcompensating because they're trying to figure out how to balance the board. My only real advice to this is just keep at it and really just try to stay relaxed on the board. Honestly, if you can, just stand completely still on the board and then just try rolling slightly. That slight rolling will give you some sort of gyroscopic stability because you will already have some sort of momentum going with you. It's similar like to a bike, where if you're already rolling, you'll be able to be more stable. And so if you combine that with just trying to stand still on the board, you'll be able to feel a little bit more comfortable while slowly rolling along. And then once you get that, you can start practicing some turning, and then you can kind of start to get a handle on the basics of maneuvering. And then once you can do that, then you really get to start to learn some of the more interesting things about OneWheeling. All right, so that was it for part one of how to OneWheel. Hopefully you kind of have a better understanding of the basics of how to get on and off the OneWheel. In the future, I'm planning to make more videos on guides on how to do stance, all the settings in the app, how to do custom profiles, all of that. But if you think I missed anything for this episode, or if you have any questions, drop them in the comments and we'll get back to you really soon. And so until next time, keep OneWheeling.